Okay, hello everyone. It looks like we're live. So welcome to this webinar titled 4 Common Grower Problems Solved with Digital Agronomy. Okay, so a little bit about Way Beyond before we get started, if you are new to our webinars. So Way Beyond, we offer an integrated digital agronomy solution that assists low to mid-tech growers, commercial growers, to increase their yield and quality of their production. We do this by combining our expertise in data, artificial intelligence, and plant science. And behind everything we do is a team of data and crop scientists that help us develop these agronomy tools and solutions that are that we will be covering off today as well. With us on the panel today, we've also got Dr. Tharindo Virantne, who's our PhD and head of crop science. So towards the end of today, when we've got some Q&A, if we go into some more curly questions, he's here to help us with that as well. My name is Lottie Bailey. I'm the Global Sales Director here at Way Beyond. And in my role, I lead our global sales teams in New Zealand, Mexico, and Morocco in our efforts to sort of match solutions to our customers' everyday growing problems. My background is 23 years in enterprise technology solution sales and account management. I spend a lot of my time on the road, traveling to customer sites, and I can see there's a lot of you on here today that I've actually met in person, which is fantastic. And with me today, I've got Lee Kirsup, our product manager. Lee has also traveled with me to visit many farms around the world. And so he's got a lot of first-hand experience of the type of problems that you're all trying to resolve. I'll let Lee tell you a little bit more about himself. Over to you, Lee.
Thanks, Lottie, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. As Lottie said, I am a product manager with Way Beyond. And my role is to turn research and innovation into solutions that you guys are going to find useful and that make your lives easier. My background is in microbiology, specializing in biomedical science, specializing in microbiology, and I have a keen interest in plant biology as well. I have 10 years experience in commercializing science and research and turning it into solutions that help people. I'm particularly interested in helping growers produce more with less.
In today's webinar, we're going to cover off 4 common problems that growers have that can be solved with digital agronomy. So the issues we'll discuss are early detection of plant stress and environmental change, avoiding climate conditions that increase your risk of pest and disease, efficient and timely deployment of your resources, and lack of visibility of farm performance over multiple sites. So we know a lot of our customers and a lot of you on here today operate multiple farms across either a single country or multiple countries. And so this is one of the challenges that we will be talking about today. For each of these issues, we will be presenting real-world examples, and we'll also be giving you some best practices on how to address these. And again, we will give you opportunities to ask questions for each of the 4 examples that we're going to share today. Okay, let's get started. Over to you, Lee.
Thanks, Lottie. So as Lottie mentioned, we're going to draw on what we've heard from our growers in terms of how they address these issues using digital agronomy. So to start off with, we're going to look at early detection of plant stress and environmental change. Over a growing cycle, plants can be exposed to various factors that induce stress. Growers aim to manage the effects of stress in order to keep plant development on target and to meet their production goals. However, some growers may be unaware of the exact level of stress their plants are experiencing and the degree to which that is affecting production, or even in what areas of their farm or their greenhouse plants are experiencing more stress than others. If you'd like to make improvements to production, getting clear on plant stress and where the plant stress is happening is a really good place to start. In our first example, we're going to look at a grower named Guillermo. Guillermo is an agronomist and crop manager at a berry farm which primarily cultivates strawberries and raspberries. He observed that in the high summer temperatures, his production was negatively affected. So he turned to digital agronomy, and what he did was he bought an infrared thermometer and went into the greenhouse and measured leaf temperatures. He was surprised to discover that in some parts of his greenhouse, leaf temperatures were reaching as high as 35 degrees Celsius, which is quite extreme. Guillermo explained, a leaf temperature of 35 degrees indicates plant stress, even without visible signs like wilting. Stressed plants reduce production capacity and have long-term consequences on both the plant health and production. While in the greenhouse, they were monitoring air temperature. Air temperature is not an accurate representation of plant temperature. In some cases, Guillermo found the difference between the air temperature and the plant temperature was as much as 7 degrees. That is a significant difference. To address this issue, Guillermo turned to digital agronomy. He installed folium sensor units along with plant temperature sensors inside of his greenhouse in various locations. Installing these units eliminated the need for him to go into the greenhouse and take those manual measurements of plant temperature using that thermometer. And it also provided continuous climate and plant temperature data for him to visualize at any time. When he visualized the data, which is what you can see here, the graphs and the heat maps revealed where the hottest areas in the greenhouse were and where his plants were experiencing the most stress. So in this here, you can see there's an example here of 33.6 degrees in this area of the greenhouse, while this area of the greenhouse was a little bit cooler. Armed with this data, Guillermo could now take steps to reduce this temperature stress. So what did he do? Well, actually, let's first look at what happens to a plant when they're experiencing temperature stress. Plants experiencing high temperatures close their stomata to conserve water. But by doing so, they reduce their ability to cool themselves through evapotranspiration. As a result, extreme plant temperatures reduce the productivity of the plant, and it's a feedback loop where the hotter the plant gets, the more it wants to evapotranspire to cool itself, but the less it is able to do so because it's trying to conserve water. So this stresses the plant. So what did Guillermo do? Well, Guillermo looked at his whitewashing practices. Whitewashing is commonly used, as you all know, to combat high temperatures and to regulate light in greenhouses. But exactly when it's applied is typically a set date based on the season or based on when you planted, and doesn't really involve consulting the data within the greenhouse. A more precise approach would be to look at the light levels, to look at the plant temperature, the humidity, and the temperature inside the greenhouse, and use that to determine when is the best time to do whitewashing. The cost of whitewashing is often tens of thousands of dollars. And so even if you want to whitewash earlier, it may be delayed due to financial constraints. In Guillermo's case, he used the data that he was collecting inside the greenhouse to demonstrate that production was indeed impacted by these high temperatures. He then used that to make a compelling business case to his higher-ups that showed implementing whitewash earlier would benefit the production and outweigh the cost of doing it earlier than otherwise would have. As a result, Guillermo applied whitewash earlier than he would have. After the whitewash was applied, Guillermo installed more sensors within the greenhouse to measure plant temperature, air temperature, humidity, and light, as well as installing some outside of the greenhouse to measure temperature, light, humidity. With this, Guillermo was able to continuously monitor both the temperature and radiation inside and outside of the greenhouse. Unlike most growers who only rely on outside light and temperature readings, Guillermo was able to precisely assess the reduction in light that the whitewash was having inside the greenhouse. So looking at his data, what he found was that whitewashing earlier successfully reduced the plant stress in the greenhouse. Plant temperatures remained below 30 degrees throughout the hottest summer periods, much better than what he was seeing previously. And as a result of this, he saw a 20 to 30% increase in production within his greenhouse. That is significant. Not only that, he also saw an improved overall fruit size. Additionally, the reduction in radiation light shown inside versus outside validated the value of whitewashing and also the farm's investment decision. With this solution, Guillermo now has early detection of plant stress and environmental changes. For future seasons, he plans to fine-tune the timing of whitewash application based on the air temperature, inside radiation, and plant temperature data. Not only that, he can now also track whitewash's degradation due to weather, and he can now decide to reapply or take off the whitewash with a more precise method. Guillermo says, the information from the solution is so important, it's a no-brainer to have it. Looking ahead, this data will further benefit the farm by aiding in operations planning and budgeting, and accurate whitewashing dates will enhance the overall efficiency of his operations. In our next example, we're going to look at a grower whose quality was declining and the supermarket that he was supplying to was complaining. Plant stress and varying environmental conditions also impact the consistency in production quality. Having a clear overall picture of the growing environment and its microclimates enable growers to better manage the challenges with consistency. As I mentioned before, this grower that we're going to talk about now had complaints from their supermarket regarding the poor shelf life of their product. The supermarket was concerned as a substantial amount of the product being sent to them had a noticeably shorter shelf life than the rest of the product. So the grower did some investigation, and what he found was that the product with the shorter shelf life was all coming from a single greenhouse, while the product with the good shelf life was coming from another. So then the question arose, what was happening in this particular greenhouse that was causing the lower quality, and how can they improve that to salvage their relationship with the supermarket? To address this issue, the grower turned to digital agronomy to uncover the root causes. They installed sensors in both greenhouses, both the underperforming one and the good performing one, and collected data on air temperature, radiation, humidity, and carbon dioxide. Once the data was visualized, they could compare the conditions in both greenhouses and understand what was different and try to replicate the conditions of the well-performing greenhouse. Studying the data revealed significant differences in the conditions between the two greenhouses. In this graph here, we can see temperature over time in both greenhouses, where the blue line is the underperforming greenhouse or greenhouse 1, and the purple line is the well-performing greenhouse or greenhouse 2. And as you can see, the temperature in greenhouse 1 was noticeably lower at night times than in greenhouse 2. If we then look at humidity, we can see that the underperforming greenhouse, the blue line or greenhouse 1, had consistently higher humidity than greenhouse 2 as well. Looking at radiation, we can see that oftentimes the underperforming greenhouse had lower light levels than the well-performing greenhouse. And finally, if we look at CO2, we can see that there is much more variation in the CO2 levels within the underperforming greenhouse than there is in the well-performing greenhouse. So now that we can visualize the data, let's look at what this actually means. So for temperature, greenhouse 1 had lower night temperatures, which means that greenhouse 2 had higher average 24-hour temperatures. And higher 24-hour average temperatures are generally better for plant health and production. What we can also see is that there was likely a higher difference in daytime temperature and nighttime temperature for greenhouse 1. For good production and good plant health, we want a smaller, but not too small, difference between nighttime and daytime temperature. So greenhouse 2 probably had a better nighttime, daytime temperature difference than greenhouse 1. Greenhouse 1 also had lower radiation than greenhouse 2. As we all know, the more light you have, the better production you're going to have, the more healthy your plants are going to be, the better quality production you're going to have. Higher humidity in greenhouse 1. High humidity indicates that they're more susceptible to disease, particularly fungal diseases. And so this likely also had an impact on the quality of the produce coming out of greenhouse 1. And finally, more variation in CO2. The grower did some more investigation around the CO2 levels in the greenhouse, and they realized that in greenhouse 2, the well-performing greenhouse, they had ventilation fans that weren't present in the underperforming greenhouse. And these ventilation fans provided better airflow to the plants, meaning there was a more consistent CO2 circulation, as well as reducing the disease impact as well. So by uncovering these critical factors and now armed with the data-driven insights, the grower was able to confidently invest in upgrading the infrastructure of the underperforming greenhouse to align that with the infrastructure of greenhouse 2, and therefore align the conditions that the plants are growing in both greenhouses. The strategic improvement significantly increased the shelf life of their product, and it ensured consistent quality as well. As a result, they repaired their relationship with the supermarket, and they were supplying consistent quality produce to the supermarket. Variance in production is something that growers want to avoid, but often one facility or one farm or one area of a farm produces more than another. In some cases, you may have a hunch or you may have an intuition on why that is, but without the concrete data to support that, it's difficult to make the investment decision to make the changes that are going to improve the quality. Without tangible data to draw conclusions, it's very hard to make the business case and actually put the investment in. Now let's look at our second problem, avoiding climate conditions that increase risk of pests and disease outbreaks. Outbreaks of pests and diseases are just a reality of growing. While careful measures are taken to reduce the likelihood of their occurrence, growers accept that these challenges are expected at some point. The first line of defense is avoiding conditions that might lead to disease outbreak in the first place. Things like good sanitation practices, robust cultural practices, spraying or treatment help reduce the risk. But should something unforeseen occur, we need to take quick action to minimize the impact and also minimize the disease spread across your farm. According to Rabobank, botrytis, which is commonly known as grey mold, inflicts an estimated $10 billion in economic losses worldwide every year. Botrytis is caused by a fungus which is known for its rapid multiplication due to the large volumes of spores it produces. But in order to infect plants, these spores require specific conditions to germinate. Disease requires a source of moisture, such as high humidity, coupled with moderate temperatures. Botrytis thrives at an ideal temperature range of 13 to 23 degrees Celsius, with humidity exceeding 90% for an extended period. Once these climate conditions are met and the spores germinate, it typically takes about 2 weeks until the disease is visible on the plants and until it can be spotted by scouters. For many growers, combating botrytis is a significant challenge. The example we're going to go over now centers on a low-tech grower who utilizes tunnel houses and at the time took manual readings. This grower was experiencing a progressive loss of their crop due to botrytis. The situation reached a critical point when the percentage of crop loss reached a staggering 40%. To give even more context to this, or even more perspective, for this grower's 1 hectare greenhouse, this represented over $150,000 in losses. So the grower clearly needed to do something about this. They wanted to solve the problem as soon as possible. Without continuous data, it made it challenging to understand where the issue was occurring and how to take effective action. To address this, the grower turned to digital agronomy. They installed wireless sensors within their greenhouses and collected and visualized the data. And here is the data on screen now. So what we can see is on the left, relative humidity, and on the right air temperature. And when the grower investigated this data, they found that humidity spiked for a period of time, and temperature remained within 13 to 23 degrees Celsius for the period of time. And these things happened 2 weeks before the scouter spotted the disease. By examining this data and incorporating knowledge of botrytis epidemiology, the grower identified the factors that were contributing to their problem. Armed with this information, they made necessary adjustments to their growing environment and crop practices. They also configured alert notifications to trigger when climate conditions became conducive to the disease for an extended period. This provided the grower with early warnings and an opportunity to take corrective or preemptive action. Being able to track both disease data and climate data together over time enables the grower to make correlations between the climate conditions and the disease incidences in that particular greenhouse, and enables them to understand what conditions in their greenhouses are likely to lead to botrytis outbreaks. In this case, it enabled this grower to understand when they were likely to get it, and also to set up an early warning system so they could avoid botrytis and avoid the effects of it. This meant they were proactive instead of reactive, and they had a higher confidence in the consistency of their production. So still on diseases, plant health is crucial in disease prevention. For disease to occur, we need 3 things. We need the disease itself, for example, botrytis spores. We need the right environmental conditions, for example, high humidity and 13 to 23 degrees Celsius. And we also need a susceptible plant. So collecting data on plant health or indicators of plant health provides context and also helps build a picture of your disease risk profile. One important indicator of plant health is vapor pressure deficit, or VPD. VPD is the difference between the amount of moisture currently in the air and how much moisture the air can potentially hold. This difference, or deficit, is in essence the amount of water that a plant can transpire. It's an excellent indicator of the plant's ability to transpire and therefore a great indicator of stress. Low VPD, for example, means low transpiration. The plant's metabolism slows down, and over time, that means a weaker plant. As seen here, in periods of high humidity, which is the blue line, and low VPD, which is the purple line, we see botrytis incidence. To measure VPD accurately, a plant temperature sensor should be placed directly on the stem or leaf. Plant temperature affects how much moisture the air can potentially hold around the plant. And as we know, plant temperature and air temperature can differ quite dramatically. So to get an accurate measure of VPD, we need to know the temperature of the plant, which affects how much water the plant can transpire. While many systems offer VPD estimations, a plant temperature sensor will provide the actual VPD reading. So VPD is a great indicator of plant stress and therefore a good point to consider when assessing risk of disease and also on deciding the actions to take. When it comes to disease, some of you may have a plant pathologist consultant. It's also really good to have data to give to that plant pathologist consultant so they can assist you in making the right decisions. The more data you can provide to them, the better they can help you make these decisions. Now let's look at deploying resources at the right time. A big driver of success at a farm is deploying the right resources to the right location at the right time, either as a preemptive measure or in response to different events. Farm managers are already heavily involved in this process, but attempting to manage the resources of multiple farms and multiple locations is an ongoing challenge. A simple example is our work with African Blue, who is Morocco's largest producer of blueberries. Their fruits are grown in polytunnel houses, both in soil and substrate, and they're equipped with basic climate control measures for heating and venting, much like a lot of the growers that we've got on the call today are. One of the needs of horticultural manager Aziz El-Kalawi was accurate and remote measurement of climate to anticipate risk of frost and disease. He told us that during the winter, frosts are common, but the only way to determine whether the crops are actually at risk is to travel out to the farms and take readings on site. For African blue, there are large distances between some of the farms, sometimes as much as a 45-minute drive on roads like this that you're seeing on the screen today. I've made that drive. It's a long time. It takes a while. So it's both time and labor intensive to actually drive out to the farm, particularly if you're coming from home. If the weather forecast indicated frost, the team would have to travel out to the farms and manually check the temperatures of the farms. When they got there, they'd have to make the decision to turn on the heaters, as well as to ventilate to mitigate the risk of disease that the heaters caused due to high humidity. So, African Blue set up alerts for when frost was imminent. The notification would alert Mr. Aziz's team so they could make the decision to deploy heaters and potentially vents in the greenhouse that were threatened, or not, based on the data that they were collecting from their sensors. So they didn't have to travel out to the farm. This saved many man-hours, unnecessary travel time, and consumption of fuel. Also not to say that they didn't have to get out of bed sometimes when they otherwise would have. Mr. Aziz told us, before, if the weather forecast indicated frost, my team would have to travel to the farms and manually check the temperature. But now, with the alerts via WhatsApp, we can successfully manage our response to potential frost and disease risk. For me, and also other senior managers, it's a help to have these sent to my phone so I can check with the farm manager that they're making the right decisions for the situation. Another example of optimizing resources comes from one of our mid-tech growers who made a simple change to the way they collected measurements. This grower's operation is over 5 farms that grow blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries. Like many farms, they were using a paper-based approach to record their data in the greenhouse. Data would first be written on paper in the greenhouse, and then the paper records were taken back to the office and retyped into an Excel spreadsheet. This takes time, and it's also prone to errors when you're doing the retyping. Excel is also difficult to maintain, especially if you're recording data from multiple farms, and it's hard to get the right information on reports out to the right people. By adopting digital agronomy, this grower was not only able to eliminate the double handling of data by using a straight to digital approach, by recording data straight in the greenhouse on their phone, they also reduced errors and freed up staff time. They could also visualize data in graphs within minutes for each analysis. Instead of waiting hours or days, they were able to look at the data and use the data within minutes. They're also able to provide that access to remote agronomy consultants and other decision makers. By adopting the digital technology in the greenhouse and removing the double handling of data by re-entering it, this farm saves 1 hour per farm per day. Across all of their farms, this equated to a saving of 1,820 hours of people time, or thousands of dollars of people time. It also allowed their team to spend their time doing something that was more productive than re-entering data into an Excel spreadsheet. So returning to African Blue for our last example, African Blue has 9 farms that are spread across the country, with 350 hectares in the north and around 120 in the south. With a high number of farm sites over such a large area, one of African Blue's main issues was the lack of visibility of farm climates as a whole. Although key information was captured at each site, it was often only retrievable manually, and it was separate from the data from the other farms. The data was siloed and not easily available to farm management in a timely fashion. Mr. Aziz told us we needed a crop monitoring and managing solution that could bring all of the data types from all of our farms together in one place to be visualized in real time. With this, we could get a better understanding of what was going on, and it would provide me with insights into crop development across all of our farms without needing to be at the farms themselves. Today, I can see an overview of the farms for myself, instead of making multiple phone calls to multiple farm managers to ask for updates. I'm getting faster, more accurate information, and that's saving me time. By harnessing digital agronomy, they're now able to continuously monitor multiple farms. They're able to visualize that climate data across farms and others. And this gives African Blue a better overall picture of the productivity of farm operations as a whole. And I think that is our last example of how growers have solved their issues using digital agronomy. So now we'd like to provide some pointers on best practice. And we've collated these based on the feedback that we've heard from our growers, particularly these ones that we've had examples from today. So the first one is automatic and continuous data collection. We want to reduce the dependence on manual readings which require on-site visits. And if we automate our data collection, have continuous data collection, we have more data to be able to do trend and other analysis types on. Collection of multiple data types. So adding on to that continuous data, we want to collect as many data types as we can. The more data types we collect, for example, climate, irrigation, plant data, the more able we are to correlate different factors to different effects. We may want to understand how irrigation affects our production, or how climate and irrigation together may affect our disease risk. And so without collecting that data, we're not able to do that. Data visualization across farms, so everyone has a clear picture of what's happening. Once we collect data from all of the farms and we're able to visualize it together, we can again do things like understanding which farms have the best quality, which ones have the best production, and what potential differences in environment or differences in other things are causing those differences in production and quality. Access to real-time single source of truth. If everyone's accessing the same data, everyone knows that that data is the truth. Role-based access and reporting. Access to a secure and real-time single source of truth, which is easily provided to both people internally and also external individuals, is a big help. We may have different people with different roles within the organization. For example, a farm manager may be interested in different things to a production manager who's managing multiple sites. Being able to have that all in one place allows each of the different people with their different roles to do what they need to with the same data. Straight to digital documentation of key information. When we go straight to digital, we save time and we also reduced the margin of human error. And alert notifications, I've gone one too far. Alert notifications when conditions fall outside of specified parameters. This is good for understanding disease risk and taking quick action for disease, but it's also good for other things like frost, for example, and we want to protect our plants from things like frost or things like high temperatures. We want to keep the health of the plant. We can do that with alerts and not have to continuously monitor or go out to the greenhouse and make decisions there and then. I think that is all of our best practice recommendations. So before we kind of go into the Q&A, I just want to give a little bit of an overview of FarmRoad. So FarmRoad is Waveyon's digital agronomy solution. And FarmRoad consists of a sensor network. Now this sensor network, you can deploy as many as you want within a greenhouse, and each sensor records radiation and PAR, so both light, humidity, temperature, CO2, and barometric pressure. And there's also an option to add plant temperature, and we discussed that's a really important metric earlier in today, as well as a substrate moisture sensor. FarmRoad also has an application that enables data collection within the greenhouse for things like pest and disease scouting, crop measurements, production measurements, and finally an online platform that brings all of that data into one place. This platform has a few additional features, not limited to these ones, but these are some key ones based on what we've discussed today. Alert notifications via WhatsApp, email, or text message for early detection of climate conditions. Multi-farm visibility, so you can understand the performance of all of your farms in one place. And role-based dashboards and reporting, bringing the right information to the right people, regardless of whether they're part of your team internally or an external consultant. Farm Road has been at the heart of all of the growers' actions today that we've seen. It's the reason the growers in today's example solved their issues and improved their production quality and farm practices. And if you'd like to know more, very happy to talk about it or get in contact with you individually. And I think we're now ready to go into the Q&A. So I'll pass back over to Lottie and I'll stick around.
Thank you very much, Lee. Yes, we have had a number of questions come through during the session. So I'm going to try and start from the top. There was a question that came through from Soyu around why the highest temperature was at 6 a.m. on the first example that you showed. Actually, that was quite observant of you. That is because the graph was screenshotted by the agronomist that is working in a different time zone. So it wasn't actually shown the farm's time zone, but the overseas agronomist time zone. You have the option on Farm Road to show the data in your own time zone or in the time zone of the farm's location. Okay, what was the next question that came through was this one here is a good one. Personally, I feel like a lot of these examples are quite basic, just normal growing knowledge, really. The climate computers should be giving the humidity readings for this. That's a good point. These are all basic agronomy knowledge, but it's very hard to make decisions even with the world of knowledge of agronomy behind you if you don't understand what's going on in your environment. Bearing in mind that what we're talking about here are technologies and growing challenges in low to mid-tech, large-scale enterprise production farms. And so in those scenarios, they do not have climate computers. I'm talking about hundreds of hectares for a single farm. And so having climate computers, it's not something that is an option, but they still require the data to be able to make agronomy decisions. Okay. All right, and then there is another question. Let me see. Can these technologies be used on a large-scale open farm, especially to detect pest disease or stress? Yes, it can be used on a large-scale farm. It could also, in theory, be used on an open farm. The challenge with an open field is that you're very limited to the levers that you have to pull, that you have available to you. And so, you know, your return on investment is always going to be tied back into the decisions that you can make to improve your crop and your yield. There's definitely some merits around pest and disease, but again, you are limited in how you can also manage those outside. So it's not necessarily that the solutions such as these can't be used. It's, are you going to be able to get sufficient return on investment, or is it going to assist you to be able to make different decisions to what you can make today? Then a question came in with, why is it better to look at the VPD, vapor pressure deficit, instead of humidity deficit? The answer is that we're not saying that it's better to look at VPD over HD, but Dr. Thorindo has weighed in with some information here saying that VPD, vapor pressure deficit, indicates the pressure difference in saturation versus measured humidity deficit, which measures water mass difference in saturation versus measured. Did I get that right, Thorindo? Do I need to read the answer out again?
No. Yeah, that's correct. So we're not saying either is better than the others. They both can be used to measure plant, have an indication of the plant health, or we have transpiration. Yeah, but there are two measures that indicates the available moisture content and also takes into consideration the temperature of the system that you're looking at.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, and then we had one of the first questions we had come through was around what sensors have we used to measure the real-time plant temperature sensor? So in all of these scenarios given today, that was using our farm road technologies, which is the sensor that Lee spoke about towards the end. It's a sensor that has 6-in-1 readings with the option of adding the plant temperature sensor that gives you that actual VPD as opposed to relying on calculated VPD. Okay, we also had a question on there was a question on fans, and that was around whether will fans work to lower the relative humidity? I'm going to attempt to answer this, but I might need my answer slightly refined by our agronomist team here. So yes, fans would work to lower your relative humidity simply by the fact of moving air also helps to cool it down and therefore lower the humidity. I don't know if there's a more technical explanation to that.
No, that's very good, Lottie. Yeah. Fans would move the air and then avoid the pockets of high humidity pockets, and that would help that. If we are specifically looking at fans,
yeah. So it would help disperse the pockets of humidity as well as drying out the air.
Even for very low tech applications, you can roll up the windows. That would do the same thing, move the air around and then let the extra humidity out.
Okay, great. Okay, we've gone through that one. Large scale climate computers. Yep. Then there was another, which was really more of a comment, but I think it's a very valid comment. So I do want to address that here. And that is saying, we made a comment around having a single source of truth and why that's important. And the comment to that was, it's a single source, it might be a single source of truth, but it also leads to single source of errors, which could lead to multiple errors. And so you sort of need to carry out reality checks. I mean, I absolutely agree with that. Nothing is ever fail proof. But I think in any environment, if you start to see a swing outside of the norm of what you would expect, then that needs to be investigated, because you're either having a climatic impact that needs to be addressed, or there's something else going on in your environment. Either way, you need to investigate and address it. But at least with measuring what's going on, you will be able to set up alerts and be notified immediately rather than after the event.
With the single source of truth, we're also meaning that everyone's accessing the same data. We do recommend that you use multiple sensors within the greenhouse. So in the example with Guillermo, you noticed that he had, I think, 3 sensors in one greenhouse. And so if we install just a single sensor, we've got, as Jonathan mentioned, sampling errors potentially. And so having multiple sensors helps reduce those sampling errors and gives you a more accurate overall view of what's happening in the greenhouse. And then, as Lottie mentioned, and as Jonathan mentioned, a holistic approach to making decisions is always the best approach, where we use data as well as crop knowledge that we have ourselves, as well as sometimes we do need to go out to the greenhouse and do a reality check. So thanks for the comment, that one. Yep,
thanks, Lee. Okay, so we've got a question from Johnny here. Once the parameters are set on the agronomy team, on what the agronomy team are monitoring, does the system then present red flags across all areas, thereby easily directing attention to the areas in most need of attention? Obviously, this is particularly important across multiple sites, where the opportunity to have an agronomy team dealing with a much larger scale brings economies of scale. Yes, the short answer is yes, that it does do that. Once you set up what parameter or what data you want to create alerts for, when the alert comes through, it will come through on your choice of WhatsApp, text message, or email, but it will actually give you what the alert is for, as well as for what farm it's for and what sector within that farm it's for. And so in some cases, you know, if your farm is in say, in Souss Massa in Morocco, you're going to be, and there's a climate event that's happened, you're probably going to get pinged with multiple alerts from each of the compartments that are monitored, or each of the farms that are monitored for that region, because they're all going to be experiencing the same increase in temperature, as an example. At the same time, you might be getting alerts from a different farm in a different country, saying that there's a risk of botrytis because you've had low temperatures and high humidity due to heating, or just high humidity due to the current weather. So yes, it will indicate to you exactly what the alert is for and to which sector it belongs. And actually, you can go further than that, because you are also able to allocate alerts for specific farms and specific sectors within the farms to specific people within your team. So you're not going to get slammed with 50 alerts. No one's going to get slammed with 50 alerts. They're only going to get slammed with the alerts that are relevant to their particular farm or sector. Okay, thank you for that question, Johnny. Dennis has got a question. Can you collaborate and see, for example, and compare with data from neighboring growers, provided they give access, of course? This is an interesting one. There is no way on Farm Road for you to be able to see any other growers' access, unless, of course, they invite you to join their farm. You would require to have a separate log on to their farm, because it's completely separated from any other customers' data. But yes, essentially, you could actually do that.
Yeah, no, it's important to note that we adhere to strict privacy and data separation rules, where your data is your data, and so no one else should have access to it unless you give them access. So you can give them a login to your data, but currently we can't see kind of two farms' data side by side, and that's by intention.
Yeah. Going back to how it's also how you can restrict access by farm within your organization. We do have consultants that are also able to provide services to their multiple clients by having their account on Farm Road, and then only giving access to specific farms to those farms that they consult to. But whereas the main Farm Road account sort of sits with the consultant. So that's another way of comparing data across multiple farms that are not within the same organization. Okay, just going to run through the questions. Quite a lot has come through towards the end here. Let me see if I've missed anything. If we have missed anything, or if you think of any other questions, then we will come back to all the participants today with additional answers. Okay, there's a question here from Ismail. How can we effectively utilize all this data? Do you have a solution to integrate and automate the management of variables such as VBD, temperature, humidity, radiation, etc.? And then it goes on to some irrigation measurements as well. Can AI be incorporated to make informed decisions and efficiently manage our crops? Okay, this is probably a bit of a longer conversation, Ismail. In short, yes, we do have a platform that allows you to integrate all of this data and manage it from a single source. We also do use AI and to provide agronomy insights to a number of our growers, depending on the crop. But again, you know, what we've talked about today, everyday common grower problems, and how to get started with digital agronomy. So you all have this knowledge on how to produce the best crop possible. What we've shown you today are tools to do this in a digital way that allows you to make decisions faster and more effectively and with more certainty. Moving from this aspect into the next step of digital agronomy around using AI, which is such a hot topic today, is absolutely possible. We do have those solutions in market, but that's a really long conversation to have. So I invite you to contact me outside of the webinar, and I'll be happy to share a lot more information with you on that, or to any of you if you've got the same questions. Okay, I think, Lee, have I missed anything?
There's one question at the end that says, if you get the alarm when something goes wrong, do you have a solution to rectify the problem? And the answer to that one is it depends on the grower. So kind of every grower is different, and what they have available to rectify the problem is different. We don't currently do integration in terms of control based on the analysis and data that we do in Farm Road. So we can get data in, and growers can get alerts and things like that. And typically, most of our growers don't necessarily have too much automated control. And so people are going out there and doing the actions manually. So at the moment, you'll get the alert, and then or you'll get the insight that you're looking for, potentially an AI-driven insight, and then it can go to the person that you need it to go to, and they can take action on the farm. For example, turning on vents or turning on the heaters, or making different irrigation decisions.
Yeah, I think it's really important to make the differentiation between monitoring, managing, and controlling. And so again, low to mid-tech, large enterprise farms tend to operate with a lot of levers that are manually pulled. Some may have IoT enabled fans or heaters, in which case they'll be able to use the alert to then kickstart those levers into action. But yes, it's not about controlling the environment, and because there's just very few growers on this large scale that would have controlled systems in place. But at least they can allocate their resources to go out to the farm at the right time to then open up the vents or start the heaters or take action to cool the environment.
Yeah, Lottie, also we work with growers. Along with these alerts, we provide some actions working with growers, depending on what controls they have. And they note those actions and pass their actions to whoever the alert recipient is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I had a question come in earlier. I had a question come in earlier that I just wanted to quickly cover before we wrap it up. And that was, we spray on a schedule to avoid diseases. Why do we need to know exactly what is happening? I really like this question because spraying is very costly. And so we do realize that a lot of our growers traditionally have always sprayed on schedule when you know from past experiences that your environment is probably ripe for certain pests or diseases at any given time of that part in the crop cycle. And so spraying on schedule has for many years been a very effective way of managing that risk. But it is very costly. It's become increasingly one of your most costly resources. So we want to make sure that we can help you only spray when absolutely necessary, but also understanding that the spray chemicals require certain climates to be effective, and diseases need specific climates to thrive. So by monitoring the environment, you can make sure that your environment is probably prone to a disease. Okay, take an action, spray, but you also want to make sure that your environment can effectively handle that spray. The spray can actually be more effective so that you're not just spraying your money down the drain, essentially. And so that's why by digitally monitoring also for pests and diseases, you can quickly identify the point of when spraying is absolutely required. Okay, all right, that's it. And we're pretty much coming to the end of our session now. So I just wanted to quickly wrap up with a summary of what we've covered with you today. I also wanted to mention that and I think I did mention this in the beginning, we have recorded today's webinar, so we will be sending out the link to the recorded webinar to all the participants and registrants today. And so you will be able to go over the case examples that Lee has shared with us today, again, in your own time, as well as all the questions and answers that we've covered today. But in summary, what we heard about today was the early detection of plant stress and environmental change. We then went over common problems around avoiding climate conditions that increase the risk of pesticide outbreaks. The efficient deployment of resources. And finally, lack of visibility of farm performance over multiple sites. So that's what we covered today, and then Lee took us through some best practice recommendations and introduced you to Farm Road, which is our digital agronomy solution. So I want to thank everyone for your time today. My contact details have just come up on the screen now. If you want to know more or you got any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I think Phil might have also added those contact details into the chat so you can copy and paste. You don't have to screenshot it. But I understand that your time is very, very valuable. And so I hope we've managed to bring some value to you today. Thank you for your time. And I think we can wrap it up there. Thanks, Lee, for taking us through these examples.
Thanks, Lottie, and thanks everyone for joining today.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.